For years, eating disorders are seen as taboo and victims hesitate to open up. You sometimes may not even realize how much your words could have encouraged disordered behavior in someone who was on edge. That's why I'm here today to tell you a bit from my own experience as well as others and some scientific facts. Grab a drink, please get cozy, and let's get started. Also, little disclaimer, this is from my personal experience and my own research. I do not mean to say that every person with an eating disorder is this way. Take this with a grain of salt. So hello, I am Sabi, an anorexic. I was diagnosed last year and honestly, I've been able to learn so much throughout this year. Maybe I shouldn't call myself an anorexic since many people say that it's a pretty harsh label. Which I agree with to some extent, but me and my mom have this as an ongoing joke now. I recently made a form in which I collected the data corresponding to knowledge of eating disorders of people corresponding to different age groups. Fancy, right? Since this was my first time, it doesn't look that good. I have looked through the results enough to know that people still don't know what an eating disorder really is, or if they do, they have a very old-fashioned view of it, or just a completely wrong one. I have also realized that many people are surrounded by victims of eating disorders, which encourages me to make this video even more. Look at graph. Thank you for looking at the graph. Now, let's start slow, since I want to make this easy to understand. Most people describe an eating disorder as a demon inside their heads, alright? Or a second voice. You may hear people calling it names like Eddie, Anna, or others, since the eating disorder has a mind of its own. This thing grows. It's literally like a parasite. The more it goes untreated, the more it takes up space in your brain and it literally becomes you. You have probably heard that a few eating disorders are actually deadly, and this explains why. You're not yourself anymore, and when it takes over, it's easy to take you out for good. Coming from my own diagnosis, anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder characterized by rapid weight loss in a short period of time, a fear of gaining weight, a person seeing themselves as bigger than they actually are, a fear of eating, thoughts occupied by food and their next meal, calorie counting, and compulsive exercising. I've compared this with sites verified by doctors, and it is obviously quite similar. Unfortunately, a few doctors still take in consideration BMI and will not diagnose someone as properly anorexic unless they are underweight. I will talk more about this further in the video and how much it angers me. Continuing on. Since this video is dedicated to my dear uncultured people, I will cover two other types of common eating disorders, being bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder. Here are their definitions, and it would be appreciated for you to actually read them, or I will come to your house and hunt you down. Thank you. Okay, you read them, right? Right? Okay. Now let's have a look in the ED community, shall we? Here we have an example of common behavior of a person suffering from bulimia nervosa. Here is our beautiful Exhibit B. Sorry, I just found this relatable, and so did many other people in the ED community. Alright, carrying on, this third picture will be our conversation starter about thinspo. This is something that many people with eating disorders look for. It is commonly found on pro-ana, also known as pro-anorexia, blogs or accounts. Thinspo is another word for thinspiration, which is usually visual representation of people at very low body weight that inspire others to keep starving themselves usually. I can't lie, I used to look for these but never knew that there were communities for it. So in my brain, it was disguised as images of thin and healthy people that I aspire to be. Here comes my favorite part, stigma. This is the most annoying element that comes with eating disorders. Society's beliefs on eating disorders are often things that stop people from speaking out on their struggles with such disorders. I'm going to link the blog page that I inspired myself off of to make my own list in the description. So a common misconception is that you have to be thin in order to have an eating disorder. Eating disorders are mental illnesses, which means it does not always show on their physical appearance. In my personal experience, people around me didn't notice much about my weight dangerously dropping, other than people that weren't close to me.
It was so rare for me to hear that I was dangerously losing weight since I wasn't conventionally underweight, just borderline. Blood pressure was extremely low either way. I could have fainted at any second, lacked concentration, and everything that mattered was my next meal and how much I'm going to work out to compensate for it. Honestly, it's exhausting just to talk about it. I have no clue how I was able to manage all that and my other activities.
Second, people think that someone is recovered when they gain weight. Oh, heck no. As I was gaining weight, I actually got worse, since my anorexic mentality is still there, but with a bigger body that is growing every day for its own good, which killed me inside, made me depressed, which went into constant fatigue and painfully suicidal thoughts. I had a friend that also struggled with this. I'm going to keep her anonymous though. She mentioned that everyone would point out her weight gain or the returning color in her face, which just angered the voice in her head. The weight gain is the part in the recovery process that can be the most painful since it's exhausting to fight. Hey, you know what? Can we stop commenting on people's bodies and switch it to something else? A simple, you're beautiful or you're handsome, without nitpicking at people's possible insecurities. You might make their day. Third, it's commonly said that eating disorders are somehow for attention.
Excuse me? What?
Because of the stigma, I always felt as if people wouldn't even want to hear about my struggles and that there was no point in talking about them since I was just a teenager on a diet. It might have been just my feeling, but it's so common for people to hear this that it's just naturally implanted in my head. Actually, most people with an eating disorder will try their best to hide their illness, which makes it the more dangerous to discourage them by labeling the ones who want to talk about it as attention-seeking. I hope you see what I mean. During a study made in 2006, a man named Stewart conducted an experiment in which people were asked to compare scripts for a quote-unquote healthy person, individuals with anorexia, schizophrenia, and asthma. It was found that people with anorexia were seen more negatively than the others since the participants saw anorexia victims as those to blame for their condition. They saw it as an act of attention-seeking. I've already mentioned people with eating disorders will mostly try to hide their illness. So there's nothing attention-seeking about it. To continue, there's one specific common thought that I wanted to talk about. That is the misconception that men don't get eating disorders. As much as EDs are more common between women, that does not mean that men do not go through body-related struggles and insecurities. Men are often expected to be buff and fit, which sets a high standard that might just as well trigger an eating disorder. There is usually a stereotypical image of a white, young ballerina who avoids food as people who have eating disorders. But these illnesses do not discriminate. 25% of people with an eating disorder are in fact male, this meaning only the ones that got diagnosed. I find that shaming people for having an illness is sick by itself. It is also common for men to get comments such as, eating disorders are for girls, which sounds extremely childish. Now let's discuss something that is kind of controversial. Personally, what I think is the most damaging of stigmas surrounding eating disorders is the fact that some hospitals still rely on weight to diagnose it. I would have probably died if my local hospital didn't recognize my serious issue. As much as they do weigh you, there is never a comparison done between people. Comparison? Anyway, you can see in the Healthline site that in multiple places in the USA, this diagnosis criteria is still valid, since the article was medically verified and left as is. People have different body types, bone structures, etc., which make them vary in weight, right? It is normal for people to have different characteristics about them, so personally I think BMI is kind of bullshit. What do you guys think? I hope we can have civilized discussions in the comments. If you can, please fill out the form in the description, since this is a school project that would help me out a lot. Thank you, and see you next time.